Hello and welcome to the Business Standard Morning Show. I'm Ishan Gera and here are the stories for the day.
इस बार मनाली चलते हैं।
नहीं गोवा।
We Indians disagree on everything, but we agree. SBI is the banker to every Indian.
SBI से ट्रैक्टर लोन लिया, पाजी ये 100% सही किया।
SBI is the banker to every Indian.
The much-awaited IPO of Life Insurance Corporation is set to open for subscription today, after it recorded bumper participation from anchor investors. The interest for the issue has been gaining currency, evident from its rising grey market premium and strong anchor book. Let's find out what analysts make of this issue and if you should subscribe to it.
The initial public offer of Life Insurance Corporation is set to open for subscription today. At 21,000 crore rupees, the offer will be India's biggest issue till date. The next two biggest issues that hit the street in the past were that of Paytm owner 197 Communication and state-run Coal India. Globally, this is the world's fifth biggest IPO in calendar year 2022. LIC's IPO witnessed robust traction from leading investors including SBI Mutual Fund, Axis Mutual Fund and Aditya Birla Sun Life MF. The company raised around 5,627 crore rupees from anchor investors on Monday at 949 rupees per share. However, much of this amount was raised with the help of domestic mutual funds as foreign funds invested little over 1,600 crore rupees. Analysts say the low demand may be because of the present risk aversion among foreign portfolio investors. Nonetheless, the government is hoping to see bumper subscription levels for LIC, riding on the back of retail and non-institutional investors. Over 8,500 crore rupees worth of shares have been reserved for retail investors, policyholders and employees in the IPO. LIC policyholders are entitled to a discount of 60 rupees over the issue price. The retail investors will be offered the issue at a discount of 45 rupees per equity share. Therefore, if you are someone who is wondering whether to apply for India's biggest IPO amid market volatility, here are the key things that you should know. LIC's total assets under management is over 3.2 times the total AUM of all domestic private peers. It also enjoys premium-based market share of 64%. At the upper price band of 942 rupees, LIC is available at a price to embedded value of 1.1 times, which is at a discount of 65% compared to the average valuation of private life insurance players. This valuation, analysts believe, factors in most of the negatives that the insurer is currently facing.
That LIC has exposed itself to number one being market share. Obviously it owns a large market share, but a closer look at the metrics over a time series could reveal that it has been continuously also conceding its market share to private peers. It has been losing market share and it is high time for it to get a stronger grip on retaining its market share in the life insurance space. Number two, it's huge reliance, almost a little bit shy of 100% reliance on its individual sales agent network could also be a vulnerability for LIC's growth and scale going. So these pose to be challenges. At the same time, the financial metrics are not really very glorious, at least when compared to its private peers. The profitability continues to remain under pressure, the margins remain under pressure, and most of it can be attributed to the low margin product mix that it has decided to be focusing on, which we expect to change.
The company's low value of new business margin, that is indicative of profit margin, was at 9.9% for FY21 compared with 23 to 26% for private players. It further has lower short-term persistency ratio relative to private peers, which shows lower customer stickiness. However, the insurer's strong market presence, coupled with the highest return on equity ratio domestically, is keeping analysts bullish on the issue.
the outlook on the overall life insurance industry is really optimistic, and if LIC plays its cards right, we expect it to be able to recoup and recover some lost ground and gain a much larger market share going ahead, provided it focuses a whole lot on its distribution effectiveness and financial efficiency. This could be a long-term value creation story for many investors. So overall, we are optimistic on the prospects of LIC as a business going ahead, while the market decides the fair market value, the right price that needs to be paid. For now, it seems to be reasonably valued, and the growth prospects being more in favor versus the challenges that the business faces.
B. Gopkumar of Axis Securities too sees LIC as a long-term investment bet. While he expects the near-term market volatility to weigh on the stock performance, he believes the under-penetration of insurance and improving financialization of savings could make LIC a long-term value bet. Given this, analysts remain uncertain about the initial listing gains, but view the IPO as a mid to long-term investment opportunity. As of Tuesday, the stock was commanding a premium of 60 rupees per share, indicating a likely listing gain of 6%. Overall, though the markets are volatile, analysts believe there is enough liquidity in the Indian markets for a large issue like LIC to get enough subscriptions.
सब अच्छी दिख रही हैं यार, कौन सी खरीदूं? ये तो वही बात हुई, 4000 शेयर्स लिस्टेड है, कौन सा लूं? वो तो सबसे आसान है। तुझे 5 पैसा नहीं पता?
अब तो सबको पता है। 5 पैसा पर है 4000 स्टॉक्स की रिसर्च, टेक्निकल टूल्स और इन्वेस्टमेंट आइडियाज। डाउनलोड 5 पैसा नाउ।
अब तो सबको पता है, investing made easy and rewarding with 5 paisa. Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.
Analysts are bullish about LIC IPO like the way G7 leaders are optimistic about wooing New Delhi away from its long-standing alliance with Russia. To this end, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has invited Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the G7 Leaders Summit next month as a special guest. But that's easier said than done. Diplomatic efforts in the past haven't brought about the sort of response from India that the West had hoped for. What's going to be the possible outcome of this latest attempt? Let's find out.
यूक्रेन के संकट के आरंभ से ही हमने तुरंत युद्ध विराम का आह्वान किया और इस बात पर जोर दिया था कि विवाद को सुलझाने के लिए बातचीत ही एकमात्र उपाय है। हमारा मानना है कि इस युद्ध में कोई विजयी पार्टी नहीं होगी, सभी को नुकसान होगा।
That is the summation of India's stand on the ongoing European conflict. However, the US and EU have responded to Russia's actions by adopting a tough stance, such as imposing far-reaching sanctions that have been described as crippling in the Western press. And they are keen to enlist greater support from New Delhi in all of this, particularly in ensuring that it doesn't help Moscow circumvent their sanctions in any way. Then there is the fact that India has refrained from overt criticism of Russia. India was among the countries that abstained in a UN vote to suspend Russia from the UN Human Rights Council. However, India also refrained from backing a Russian resolution that sought to deflect the blame for the humanitarian crisis it has created in Ukraine. Amid all of this, Moscow has praised New Delhi's independent foreign policy with regard to the ongoing conflict.
I believe that Indian foreign policy is characterized by independence and the concentration on real national legitimate interests.
While Moscow might appear to be satisfied, the West, particularly the US, isn't. And their view of India's policy with regard to the Russia-Ukraine crisis was best summed up by the US President himself earlier in March.
In the Pacific, The Quad is, with the possible exception of India being somewhat shaky on some of this, but Japan has been extremely strong, so has Australia, in terms of dealing with Putin's aggression.
At the end of March, the US had said that it would not like to see a rapid acceleration in India's imports from Russia, including energy and other commodities. India, however, has followed a policy that it says is in keeping with its national interests. Just consider the following Business Standard report. Imports from Russia rose nearly 33% to $1.1 billion in March, from a shade above $831 million in the previous month. This growth in imports was largely on account of oil. Note that India and Russia have also been exploring transactions through the rupee-ruble mechanism. Such a mechanism would also cause tensions between India and America and its allies. There have also been calls for India to curtail its purchases of Russian military equipment. However, given the strategic nature of some of these platforms, that too might prove to be a tall order, at least in the immediate future. This is the context in which Prime Minister Modi will be participating in the G7 summit.
We should not be looking at the invitation to Prime Minister Modi entirely through the lens of India's relationship with Russia. I think there is far more at stake, both for India as well as for the European countries and the West in general, with respect to what is a very, very changed and changing international geopolitical environment. The relationship with Russia and the Ukraine war is a part of that exercise, but it is far more important, I think, that India and the European countries and the United States of America, as also, the Quad countries, they should really be working together in order to shape what is going to be a very different kind of an international geopolitical environment. I think the West understands that India's relationship with the Russians has certain legacy issues, which India, like some of the European countries themselves, is not able to, change in a short period of time. Overall, the trend over the last several years has been that India-Russia relations, in fact, are diminishing in a sense, are declining. Especially if you look at, the February 4, the joint statement between Russia and China, one important consideration for India, which has been that Russia can also be a balancing factor in terms of its relations with China, that also has become a weaker argument because Russia has now gone so much closer to China. So I do not think that, the relationship with Russia is of such an order that it is of great worry to the West. I don't think we should be so much hung up on how important a factor, India's so-called rhetorical neutrality is for the West. Far more important is, I think, in terms of India working together with the West on substantive issues. And if we are looking at where India's interests lie, in terms of, for example, its own economic and technological transformation, the partnership with Europe, with the partnership with the United States, partnership with Japan, these are going to be critical factors.
There's unlikely to be a sudden shift in India-Russia relations due to Western coaxing. Instead, they will follow the trajectory that has become evident in the past few years, where India will find growing convergence with the West, but continue to balance its ties with Russia, even as those ties lose the sheen they had during the Soviet era and the early 2000s.
क्या हाल? मत पूछ यार, फिर से स्टॉक्स में फंस गया।
तो स्टॉक्स के साथ बॉन्ड्स, इंश्योरेंस, गोल्ड में बैलेंस कर।
इसमें बहुत तामझाम है।
तुझे 5 पैसा नहीं पता?
अब तो सबको पता है। 5 पैसा है ऑल इन वन अकाउंट। डाउनलोड 5 पैसा नाउ।
अब तो सबको पता है। Investing made easy and rewarding with 5 paisa. Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.
Around 11% fewer households demanded work under the Rural Employment Scheme MGNREGA in April. The centre has asked officials to plug leakages in welfare schemes, and at the same time some beneficiaries are returning back to urban areas as economic activity picks up. So what led to this fall in demand for MGNREGA work in April? This report attempts to find out.
The unprecedented crisis triggered by the pandemic during the first lockdown in March 2020 had forced more than 10 million migrant workers to return to their villages. Most of them, unable to find sustenance in agriculture during the lean season, took refuge in MGNREGA scheme. This shot up the demand for the Rural Job Guarantee Program. MGNREGA guarantees at least 100 days of wage employment in a financial year to every rural household whose adult members volunteer to do unskilled manual work. Provisional data for the month of April indicates a turnaround in the employment situation in rural areas. The number of households seeking work under the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act in April was 11.15% lower than the numbers in the same month last year. Nearly 23.26 million households sought work under the scheme compared to 26.18 million households last year. As economic activity picked up, workers are once again migrating back to urban areas. However, a disproportionately large number of people are still seeking work under the scheme. In the comparable pre-pandemic months, 16 to 17 million households demanded MGNREGA work.
So the decline in MGNREGA jobs in April, partly it could be due to the increase in the urban jobs. Migrant people might have returned to the urban areas because many of the contact intensive sectors like hotels, trade and aviation, everything is now coming to a normal. So that is one reason why there could be decline compared to the last year, April 2021. But still, as the numbers show, they are much higher than the pre-pandemic level. So activity is still, they have not come to the pre-pandemic levels. So it may take some time to that. So that is one reason. And also within rural areas, also some maybe non-farm activities and those things might have increased, some construction activities or infrastructure also is improving. Whether this decline is due to removal of fake job codes, yeah, that could be possible because the expenditure also has, government has not increased in the budget. So there could be some indirect rationing in the jobs created.
Business Standard recently reported that the Finance Ministry has asked various line ministries and departments responsible for implementing subsidy and welfare schemes to cut wasteful expenditure expeditiously and to plug leakages. The number of MGNREGA beneficiaries rose to around 70 million when the economy slumped during pandemic lockdown, up from 50 million before the lockdown. Policymakers at the centre are reportedly concerned that the figure has not come down to pre-pandemic levels yet. Chakradhar Buddha, a researcher at study group LibTech India, said the work demand data pointed towards the fact that we haven't come back to pre-pandemic normal economic activities in rural areas. An official told Business Standard that departments have been asked to map the most backward districts and compare them with relatively developed ones. If a developed district in a state has more beneficiaries than an aspirational district, it means there are ghost beneficiaries of welfare schemes, the official said. Meanwhile, civil society activists have been pointing out that the money allocated for the program in the budget for FY23 at 73,000 crore rupees is inadequate and could lead to demand getting artificially suppressed. The actual expenditure could be lower because a significant part, almost 20,000 crore rupees, could be spent on clearing the dues of FY22. In FY22, the centre had budgeted 73,000 crore rupees for MGNREGA but ended up spending almost 98,000 crore rupees.
There is absolutely no question that there remains a huge demand for NREGA. It doesn't quite reflect the reality because there are delayed payments. because there's a shortage of money. There has been a squeezing of NREGA towards the end of last year. Actually, in fact, demand is a reflection of the amount of money available in the system. But this time, for the first time in the history of NREGA, actually the labor budgets got cleared in the last days of March and they've been significantly curtailed. And this is actually central government trying to curtail demand because they don't have enough money. Similarly, this system of ghost workers, because the central government for years has been under pressure for not providing enough funds as it should according to the law. So now they have come upon this argument that no, actually this is a very inflated demand, and they're using transparency, accountability, social audit. There are letters out there in the public domain saying we will not give you money unless you put these things into place. Of course, those things should be put into place, but not at the cost of the people not getting work. Quite possible that some people are being caught in this because there is a whole nexus of people that on the ground level, people show up for work and then they go home, they go and work in the sarpanch's place. There is a huge amount, regardless of economic recovery, there is a huge amount of unmet demand. There has been some recovery in urban areas. Yes, we have also seen some people returning, but we've seen many people who are still here. I think this understanding that because there may be some economic recovery in urban areas, it means that NREGA's demand will come down is looking in the wrong place.
A host of factors like revival in urban economic activity, cracking down on ghost beneficiaries, and rationing of funds by the centre could have contributed to a fall in MGNREGA demand in April.
अब क्या किया?
शेयर्स में ट्रेडिंग।
तुम्हें 5 पैसा नहीं पता?
ओए, अब तो सबको पता है। 5 पैसा पर मिलते हैं रिसर्च टूल्स, पोर्टफोलियो एनालिटिक्स और इन्वेस्टमेंट आइडियाज भी। डाउनलोड 5 पैसा नाउ।
अब तो सबको पता है Investimate easy and rewarding with 5 paisa. Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.
The Drug Controller General of India has recently approved the emergency use of the COVID-19 vaccine Corbevax for children aged 5 to 12. Corbevax is India's first indigenously developed recombinant protein subunit vaccine. Our next report simplifies the new vaccine and elaborates how it can boost the immune response in your kid.
As COVID-19 cases rise in various parts of the country, the Drugs Controller General of India has approved the restricted use of Covaxin and Corbevax in emergency for children below 12 years. The latter was already being used for inoculation against COVID-19 in the 12 to 18 age groups. Corbevax is a protein subunit COVID-19 vaccine developed by Hyderabad-based bioproducts company Biological E in collaboration with biopharmaceutical company Dynavax Technologies and the Baylor College of Medicine in the US. India's Department of Biotechnology and its public sector undertaking, the Biotechnology Industry Research Assistance Council, have supported the vaccine candidate from the preclinical stage through phase 3 clinical studies. Corbevax uses a traditional recombinant protein-based technology that enables its production at large scales, making it accessible to inoculate the global population. The vaccine technology was created and engineered at the Baylor College of Medicine in Texas, US. It was then licensed to Biological E through a commercialization team at the Texas-based university for development and production. The adjuvant used in the vaccine is developed by Dynavax Technologies in the US. It is made from the receptor binding domain of the coronavirus spike protein, which allows the virus to latch on and enter human cells. When injected, the harmless piece of the spike protein is expected to trigger an immune response in the body. The available safety and immunogenicity results of the ongoing phase 2 and 3 clinical studies indicated that the vaccine is safe and immunogenic. The Translational Health Science and Technology Institute, an autonomous institute of the Department of Biotechnology, provided immunogenicity data for the phase 2 and 3 studies. Corbevax is a 2-dose vaccine administered intramuscularly and can be stored at 2 degrees to 8 degrees Celsius. Clinical trials indicate that Corbevax can effectively prevent COVID-19 disease following 2 doses given at 4 weeks interval. However, the duration of protection against COVID-19 disease is currently unknown.
इसको 30 डिग्रीज कर देते हैं। अरे नहीं यार, 45 डिग्री सही है।
We Indians disagree on everything, but we agree. SBI is the banker to every Indian.
SBI का वीडियो KYC सेविंग्स अकाउंट। Finally I agree.
SBI is the banker to every Indian.
Over 50% of the children in the 15 to 18 age group have been fully vaccinated. In the 12 to 14 age group, just about 40% have received the first dose of vaccine. That is all for today. For more news and analysis, log on to businessstandard.com. We'll be back tomorrow with our next episode. Thank you for watching.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.